The town of Meridian Springs had been many things over the years. A mining camp, a cattle stop, a place where men came to forget what they'd done elsewhere. But for the last 3 years, it had been something different. It had been civilized. Not clean, mind you. Not innocent, but civilized. And that was all because of one man, Sheriff Thomas Brennan. Brennan wasn't the fastest gun. He wasn't the meanest. But he was constant. Every morning at dawn, you'd see him walk from the jailhouse to the general store, boots hitting the boardwalk in that same steady rhythm. He'd tip his hat to the women, nod to the men, keep his eyes on everything. And somehow that was enough. The gamblers stayed in their saloons. The drifters kept moving. The outlaws rode around Meridian Springs instead of through it. People slept with their doors unlocked until the night of August 14th, 1876. That was the night the law disappeared. It started ordinary enough. Brennan made his evening rounds just after sunset, checking the locks on the bank, glancing into the saloon windows, making sure the peace held. His deputy, a young man named Cole Masterson, sat outside the jailhouse cleaning his rifle. Inside, they had 2 prisoners, small-timers, one for being drunk and disorderly, the other for cheating at cards. Nothing that mattered. Brennan stopped to talk with Cole around 9 o'clock. Folks remembered that. They talked about the weather, about whether the cattle drive would come through this season. Normal things. Then Brennan said goodnight and walked toward his boarding house at the end of Main Street. He never made it there. Around midnight, a woman named Sarah Hollis woke to the sound of her dog barking. She looked out her window and saw something strange. The jailhouse door was wide open, just hanging there in the wind, creaking back and forth. No light inside, no movement. She watched for a few minutes, then went back to bed, telling herself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Come morning, the town woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind, the kind that sits heavy in your chest. The jailhouse was empty. Sheriff Brennan was gone. Deputy Cole Masterson was gone. The 2 prisoners were gone. No blood, no signs of struggle, no note, nothing but open cells and that door still swinging in the morning breeze. At first, people made excuses. Maybe there'd been an emergency. Maybe someone had been hurt out at one of the ranches and both lawmen had ridden out together. Maybe the prisoners had been moved. But by noon, those excuses started to crack because nobody had seen them leave. Nobody had heard horses. Nobody had heard shots or shouts or anything at all. In a town of 300 souls where everyone knew everyone's business, 2 lawmen and 2 prisoners had simply vanished into the dark like smoke. The mayor, a soft-handed businessman named Vernon Pike, called a meeting at the town hall. About 40 people showed up. Pike stood at the front, sweating through his collar despite the cool morning, and tried to sound confident. "I'm certain there's a reasonable explanation," he said. "Sheriff Brennan is a responsible man. He wouldn't just abandon his post." An old rancher named Gus Hartley spoke up from the back. "Then where is he, Vernon?" Pike had no answer for that. Someone suggested forming a search party. A few men volunteered, but their hearts weren't in it. Search where? For what? If Brennan and his deputy wanted to be found, they'd have left word. And if they didn't want to be found, well, that was something else entirely. By evening, the first shift happened. A gambler named Jack Savoy, who'd been playing quiet poker in the back room of the Silver Dollar Saloon for months, moved his game to the main floor. He set up at the big table near the window where everyone could see. Within an hour, the bets had tripled. Men who'd never gambled before put money down. The whiskey flowed heavier. The laughter got louder. Nobody stopped him. There was nobody to stop him. That night, 3 fights broke out. Nothing too serious. Just shoving and harsh words. But in the past, Brennan would have shut it down before the first punch landed. Now, the fights just burned themselves out, leaving broken chairs and bloody noses and a new understanding hanging in the air. The rules had changed. Day 2 brought the drifters. They'd been camped a few miles outside town, the kind of men who usually kept their distance from Meridian Springs. Too much law, too much order. But word travels fast on the frontier, and somehow they'd heard. 4 of them rode in just after dawn. They hitched their horses outside the general store and walked in like they owned the place. They took supplies. Not a lot, just enough to make a point. The store owner, A thin man named Charles Webb asked them to pay. One of the drifters just smiled. "Sure," he said. "We'll pay you next time." They walked out. Charles stood there holding his account book, his hands shaking, and he didn't follow them. He didn't shout. He didn't do anything at all, because there was no law to back him up. By midday, 2 more groups had ridden into town. Men with hard eyes and guns worn low. They asked around about Brennan, about what happened. People gave him different answers because nobody really knew. But the question underneath was always the same. Is it true? Is the law really gone? And when nobody could say otherwise, those men stayed. The mayor called another meeting that evening. Fewer people showed up this time. Pike proposed hiring a new sheriff, sending telegrams to other towns, maybe even contacting the territorial marshal. But old Gus Hartley stood up again and said what everyone was thinking. By the time help gets here, Vernon, there won't be anything left to help. That night, the town heard gunshots for the first time in 3 years. 2 of them, out past the livery stable. In the morning, a drifter was found dead in the dirt, shot through the chest. No witnesses, no arrests. Nobody even asked questions. The body stayed there until noon before someone dragged it away. Day 3. This was when things truly began to unravel. The bank closed its doors. The owner, a man named Robert Fenwick, claimed he wasn't feeling well. But everyone knew the truth. He was scared. Scared that without the law, someone would decide to help themselves to what was inside his vault. And he was right to be scared. The stores started closing early. People stopped walking alone after dark. Mothers kept their children inside. The town was folding in on itself, trying to get small, trying not to be noticed. But some people don't fold. Some people expand. Jack Savoy moved his poker game to his second table. The stakes climbed higher. Men were losing money they didn't have, making promises they couldn't keep. And when they couldn't pay, Savoy had men who'd collect. Big men. Men who drifted into town over the last 2 days. A merchant named Daniel Cross accused one of the drifters of stealing from his shop. He made the mistake of saying it out loud, in the street where everyone could hear. The drifter walked right up to him and hit him across the face with the back of his hand. Daniel fell. The drifter stood over him. "You calling me a thief?" Daniel didn't answer. He just lay there in the dust, blood running from his nose. And after a moment, he shook his head. "That's what I thought," the drifter said and walked away. Nobody helped Daniel up. That night, Vernon Pike's house was robbed. They took money, jewelry, 2 bottles of expensive whiskey. Pike reported it the next morning to anyone who'd listen, his voice high and panicked. But there was no jailhouse to report it to, no sheriff to write it down, no deputy to investigate. There was just Main Street, and the men walking down it with guns on their hips, and the slow creeping understanding that Meridian Springs had become something different. Day 4 brought the real violence. A young cowhand named Tommy Price got into an argument with one of Savoy's dealers. The dealer claimed Tommy owed money from a card game. Tommy said the game was rigged. The argument moved outside. Voices got loud. Then a shot rang out. Tommy fell in the street, clutching his stomach. He was 19 years old. The dealer stood there, smoke curling from his pistol, and looked around at the people watching from doorways and windows. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. After a moment, the dealer holstered his gun and walked back into the saloon. Tommy died in the dirt an hour later. His mother screaming over his body was the only sound in town. They buried him the next morning. No trial, no investigation, just a grave on the hill. That's when the mayor disappeared. Vernon Pike locked himself in his house and refused to come out. Some said he was drinking. Others said he'd simply given up. Either way, the last symbol of authority in Meridian Springs had gone silent. The town belonged to whoever wanted to take it, and Jack Savoy wanted it. By day 6, Savoy had moved into the hotel's best suite. He held court there like some kind of king, men coming and going at all hours. He owned the saloon now, owned the gambling, owned the fear, and he was smart about it. He didn't let things get completely out of hand. Just enough chaos to keep people scared, but not so much that the town burned down. He needed Meridian Springs. It was perfect, far enough from the territorial capital that help wouldn't come quick, close enough to the cattle trails that money flowed through. And now, without the law, it was wide open. But Savoy made a mistake. He thought he was the only one watching. the only one waiting. He was wrong. On the seventh night, a stranger rode into town. Nobody saw him arrive. He just appeared, sitting at a table in the back corner of the Silver Dollar Saloon, hat pulled low, nursing a whiskey. He didn't say much, didn't gamble, just watched. One of Savoy's men approached him, told him the table was reserved. The stranger looked up. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless in the lamplight. "I'll move when I'm done," he said quietly. The tone in his voice made Savoy's man hesitate. There was something underneath those words, something old and cold and absolutely certain. The man backed off. Savoy heard about it. He came downstairs himself, curious. He walked over to the stranger's table and sat down uninvited. "I don't know you," Savoy said. "No," the stranger agreed. "You don't. What brings you to Meridian Springs?" The stranger took a slow sip of whiskey. "Heard the law left." Savoy smiled. "That's right. Opened up some opportunities." "I imagine it did. You looking for work?" "I could use a man who knows how to handle himself." The stranger set down his glass. "I'm not looking for work." "Then what are you looking for?" The stranger finally looked directly at Savoy. "Answers." Something in Savoy's smile faltered. Just for a second. "Answers to what?" "To what happened to Sheriff Brennan." The saloon had gone quiet.
No,
Not
don't
completely.
leave him.
The piano
You
still
can't
played.
just walk away.
Cards still shuffled. But that particular kind of quiet
hurt bad.
where
Please help
everyone's
us.
listening
Get away from
without
him
seeming
now.
to.
He needs a
Savoy
doctor.
leaned
Don't
back
let
in
him
his
take
chair.
me.
Nobody knows what happened to Brennan. He just left. Men like Brennan don't just leave. Maybe you didn't know him as well as you think. The stranger was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I knew him for 20 years. We fought together in the war. Hunted together after. He asked me to come here 6 months ago. Told me he might need help. Said he'd been hearing things. Seeing things. Said something wasn't right in Meridian Springs." Savoy's face didn't change, but his hand moved closer to his gun. Around the saloon, his men were watching now. 6 of them. Maybe 7. "Well," Savoy said carefully, "like I said, nobody knows what happened. Somebody knows," the stranger said. "Somebody always knows." He stood up. For a moment, the entire saloon held its breath, waiting for guns to clear leather, waiting for blood. But the stranger just put a coin on the table for his whiskey and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped and spoke without turning around. "My name is William Cade. I'll be staying at the boarding house. Anyone who wants to tell me what really happened to Thomas
You gonna stay
Brennan
down there
should
all
come
day?
find me."
Reckon
Then
not.
he was
It's catching
gone.
my breath. This
Savoy
town's
sat
finished
there
with
for a
you.
long
We'll
time
see.
after, staring at the door. Finally, he looked at his nearest man and said 2 words. "Follow him." But William Cade wasn't easy to follow. He'd been a tracker before the war and a hunter after. He knew when he was being watched. He led Savoy's man on a winding path through the dark streets of Meridian Springs, then simply vanished. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. Savoy's man searched for an hour before giving up. The next morning, Cade was sitting on the steps of the jailhouse when the sun came up. Just sitting there, waiting. People walked past, staring but not stopping. Around noon, an old woman approached. Her name was Martha Green. She'd lived in Meridian Springs longer than almost anyone. She sat down next to Cade without being asked. "You really knew Sheriff Brennan?" she asked. "I did." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, 3 nights before he disappeared, I saw him arguing with someone. Out back of the saloon. Couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was heated. The other man was Jack Savoy." Cade looked at her. "You tell anyone this?" She shook her head. "Who would I tell? And what good would it do? I'm an old woman. Who'd believe me? I believe you." She smiled sadly. "Be careful, Mr. Cade. This town's not what it was. It's something else now. Something mean." She stood up and walked away, slow and tired. Cade sat there on those steps all day. A few more people approached. A rancher, a store owner, a woman who ran the boarding house where Brennan had lived. Each one had something small to share. A detail, a suspicion, a piece of the truth. By evening, Cade had a picture forming. Brennan had been investigating Savoy for weeks. Suspected he was running more than just crooked card games. Maybe moving stolen property. Maybe worse. Brennan had been building a case. Quiet-like. Careful. He told his deputy to be ready. Told him that when the time came, they'd have to move fast. But Savoy had eyes everywhere. He'd found out, and he'd moved faster. That night, Cade walked into the Silver Dollar Saloon again. This time, he walked straight to Savoy's table. "We need to talk," he said. Savoy looked up from his cards. His men shifted, hands moving toward guns. But Savoy held up a hand. "About what?" "About the night Sheriff Brennan disappeared. About what really happened." Savoy set down his cards carefully. "You're making some dangerous accusations, friend." "I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. Brennan was investigating you. You found out. You did something about it. Prove it." Cade leaned forward. "I don't need to prove it. I just need people to believe it. And people in this town are scared, Savoy. Scared of you.
You think
scared
this
of what's
is funny?
happened. But fear only lasts so long.
You should see your face.
Eventually,
I'm done
it
with
turns
you.
into something else. And what's that? Anger." Savoy studied him. Then he laughed. "You're going to start some kind of uprising? You and what army? Look around, Cade. I own this town now. The people here, they're sheep. They'll do what they're told." "Maybe," Cade said. "Or maybe they just needed someone to remind them they could fight back." He turned and walked out before Savoy could respond. What happened next came fast. Cade spent the following day talking to people. Not preaching, not commanding, just talking, reminding them of what Meridian Springs had been, asking them what they wanted it to be. By evening, something had changed in the air. You could feel it, a kind of electricity. That night, 30 men gathered in the livery stable. Ranchers, store owners, cowboys, even old Gus Hartley. They weren't soldiers. Most of them weren't even fighters. But they were tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of watching their town rot. Cade stood in front of them and said, "I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise everyone will make it through. But I can promise that if we don't do something now, Meridian Springs will be lost forever. And so will the truth about what happened to Thomas Brennan." A young man in the back spoke up. "What do you think happened to him?"
Sharp, stay together.
Cade was quiet for a moment. "I think they killed him. Him and his deputy.
Boys,
I think they're
found us a
buried
real
somewhere
opportunity.
outside of
We
town,
move
probably
together,
out
we
in
ride
the
it down."
Badlands where nobody goes. "I think Savoy needed the law gone so he could take over. And I think he'll kill anyone else who gets in his way." "Then let's end this," Gus Hartley said. They moved just before midnight. Not to the saloon. That's where Savoy would expect them. Instead, they went to his hotel room, surrounded the building. Cade walked in through the front door alone, climbed the stairs, and knocked. When Savoy opened the door, he found himself staring at 30 armed men in the street below. His own men were there too, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. "It's over," Cade said simply. For a moment, it looked like Savoy might fight anyway. His hand moved toward his gun. But then he saw the look in Cade's eyes, and he knew that Cade wasn't like the people of Meridian Springs. Wasn't afraid. Would pull that trigger without hesitation. Savoy's hand moved away from his gun. "Where is he?" Cade asked. "Where's Brennan?" Savoy's jaw worked. Then he said, 6 miles north, off the old mining road, near the dried creek bed. They found the bodies 2 days later.
Stop right there!
Sheriff Thomas
Hang
Brennan,
on, stop,
Deputy
don't
Cole
move!
Masterson, and the 2 prisoners. All shot, all buried in shallow graves. Brennan had been right. Something hadn't been right in Meridian Springs. And when he gotten close to exposing it, Savoy had eliminated the threat. They brought the bodies back, gave them proper burials. The whole town came out. People cried, not just for the dead men, but for what they represented. For the 7 days when law and order had vanished, and they'd all seen what they were capable of becoming. Savoy and his men were hanged a week later. Some people said that wasn't justice, that it was revenge. Maybe they were right. But Cade figured Brennan would have understood. On the frontier, sometimes justice and revenge were the same face. William Cade stayed in Meridian Springs for 2 months after that. Wore Brennan's star, kept the peace, helped them find a new sheriff, a good man from a town 3 counties over. Made sure the law took root again. Then one morning, he packed his saddle and rode out just as quietly as he'd ridden in. Some folks said he'd done what he came to do. Others said he was just passing through, never meant to stay. Either way, Meridian Springs survived. Change, maybe. Harder, certainly. But alive. And years later, when people told stories about those 7 days when the law disappeared, they always ended the same way. They'd talk about the darkness, the fear, the violence, and then they'd talk about William Cade and how sometimes it takes one man to remind a whole town what they'd forgotten, that they were stronger than their fear, that they were more than their worst moments. and that the law isn't just a badge or a gun or a man in an office. It's the choice. The choice to stand up when standing up is dangerous. To speak when speaking could cost you everything. To remember that civilization isn't given to you. It's something you fight for. Every single day, the night law disappeared from Meridian Springs taught them that. And they never forgot it again.